What's up, everybody? We're back with the second video in our organ fugue series. So the last one I put out about a week ago, we did the exposition. So if you want to learn about fugal exposition, which is honestly probably the most structured way of writing counterpoint, go check that video out. But we're on to the fun stuff now today. This is going to get silly. We're going to get carried away a bit with this development section. Really, what I want to do in this video is articulate that writing counterpoint, as much as it can seem intimidating and academic, can be fun and cool. It can be chill. So that's what we're going to do here now. We're going to dive in and write this development section together. So we're in Sibelius here now. Before we get going with the development section, we'll just have a listen to the exposition. I'll point out where the subject is, where the answers are, and a few things, a few key modulations. So we'll have a listen to the exposition as well as a bit of transition material that I couldn't help myself. I had to go and pick at this since we last recorded a bit. So we'll have a listen to the thing before we dive in here. So here's our subject. We're in F sharp minor. It's being played in the right hand here. There's the end of the subject. We're modulating to the dominant. Counter subject and answer coming in here. Our counter subject's actually just a chromatic scale, which means we have to modulate within the subject, but it opens up a lot of possibilities in the development section. We've got our second subject here. Subject is happening in the left hand. We're back in the tonic key. Three voices going here. Okay, we've modulated back into the dominant. We've got the answer, but the subject is coming into the pedals here. Right, that's the end of the exposition. We're doing a bit of a stretto thing with a sequence, harmonic sequence. Right, so we're finding ourselves in E minor here. All right, and then what we did basically was we transitioned from C sharp minor to E minor through that sequence, and then modulated through a diminished seventh chord down here, back into F sharp minor. So what we can do here is a stretto and a bit of a sequence. So we've got this dee 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 in the in the right hand up here, but then we can also bring it down in the pedal. So the harmony we have here, we've got a diminished seventh chord. Actually, we can do it verbatim. This is one of the great things about Sibelius, is we can just copy and paste. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, there are lots of like counterpoint purists out there who will be like, you should be able to do this by hand. That's just dumb. We've got all these great tools. Make it easier on yourself. Do more with the tools we have rather than less with the things. The way that Bach used to do it, I guess. That's my take here. Fairly obvious to anyone who's an organist or a pianist, but I want to toss it out there that, especially when we're dealing with this right hand, we're writing for two parts in the right hand. Don't get too carried away with having imitations happening between in the same hand, because it can make stuff that's not playable or that's needlessly difficult. And we'll bring this guy up to the D, and then we're going to resolve this to a tonic chord. And then what we can do is we could maybe even do an inversion of the subject down here. So this kind of messes up our idea here, because we need to get a third in this chord. So honestly, we can put it in the pedal, because I want to get a subject imitation happening here. So, and we'll do our sequence here. So this is going to be like a fairly stereotypical sequence, but honestly, with these sorts of things, it's better to keep the sequences and the harmonies kind of simple, so we can have lots of strettos. So what I've done here to get our development going, we want to find ways to do sequences that aren't going to be vanilla and boring, and the chromatic scale counter subject is going to help us do that. Right? So what I've done, we've come down here. We have a bit of a stretto thing going on. at the beginning of, that point that we just looked at. We've got a bit of a stretto thing going on. We've got the subject happening verbatim in the right hand, and then it's followed by the next phrase, actually exactly how it appears in the exposition, in the right hand. But we've got different harmonies, and we've got some imitation. That stretto piece coming in here first in the pedal, and then in the in the left hand. And then what we do is we move on to have this harmonic sequence where we're doing a descending chromatic scale in the pedal, which allows us to modulate through or transition through quite a number of different keys, because this dee idea could be overplayed, right? Like you could easily go, and if you do 1 4 7 3 kind of thing all the way through in your sequence, like that's fine if you do that once, but it'll quickly get boring if we don't spice things up. So let's have a listen to this bit that I've just put together here. So yeah, this is pretty good, I think. And what's also good to do is to have some sort of sustained line as well, right? So this right hand, the top part, is really just doing descending scale suspensions, sort of alluding to this counter subject down here. So I feel like now we need to have a bit of an arrival point. We need to get out of this sequence because whilst it is cool, you really don't want to repeat a sequence. Like 3 times is the tops that you'd want to repeat. The plan for these next few bars is we're just going to go dominant tonic and go back and forth between these musical ideas and introduce them in different parts. But if you go and do like the sort of crazier harmonies, I guess, that we had in the previous few bars, the counterpoint here is actually fairly simple, right? We're going imitating between 2 parts with more sustained things happening in the other 2 parts here. But if we want to do, a stretto or something a lot more imitative, keep the harmonies simple. Like it doesn't all need to be crazy for this. You can be showy and impress people with the imitations that happen rather than the harmonies in this sort of music. So we're gonna go to a dominant here, and this can. That can go like that. A dominant 7th motion will bring in the 2nd voice on this G to get a more fulsome chord. See that? Oh, what we'll do instead is we'll do this. We'll put them on the E sharp because we don't have a leading note in that chord. Oh, we can do something cool here. We can sneak in a little augmentation of the subject. Yeah, let's do this. We'll do a bit of an augmentation of the inversion of the subject. Let's go in the right hand there, and we'll bring the pedal in this bar. So we're gonna modulate here. We'll put an A sharp. So we'll go to an F sharp dominant 7th, so we can get this chromatic thing going. Oh, this is gonna be gnarly because everyone's gonna think that this E sharp is a leading note, but it's gonna fall. We're gonna get our counter subject in here, and it's going to fall to this E natural, which is going to be the dominant 7th. We'll get our counter subject going on here in the inner voice. Yes. And we can suspend this. You could write it as a dotted. I just find it easier to view the parts and know that this is a suspension if you can see that falling motion. It's purely a preference thing. I kind of roasted the ascending 4th sequence earlier, so we're gonna do one of those. I feel like we can do that, and we'll do it in a major and G major, ascending 4ths. But what I'll do is I'll probably put this on the 2nd part here, and do a cheeky shift where this will be the thumb, and then we'll have something going in the higher parts. And we'll introduce a stretto, a sequence with a bit of a stretto. Honestly, this is a great example of how you can get more movement, right? I think that, suspensions are one of the first things we learn in harmony, right? One of the first things that we learn. Suspensions, accented passing notes, appoggiaturas. but like in this sort of writing, it's so like easy to implement them, to think, okay, how can I get movement, right? Right here, I don't want to just have two half notes, and I want to save my pedal to have a moment in a few bars or later on, right? If I go, you know, instead of resolving this in a fairly basic way, I can just add a suspension in there. Now we have movement on a beat that we didn't have movement on, right? Like, we didn't need to go and do something fancy or do something complicated. Just writing, understanding the harmonies, finding ways to work the subject in, and then spotting, okay, there's an opportunity to add movement in a way that just kind of falls into place and makes sense, is like what you should be trying to do in this sort of music. Because again, we want to, the intellectual part of writing a fugue isn't necessarily going and making it quote unquote complicated, or doing something crazy or totally novel. It's, okay, how can I go and come up with good musical ideas, develop them, and then harmonize them and bring them back in cool and fun ways. We'll make it a dominant 7 going to D, and maybe we'll go to D minor. Yeah, we'll go to D minor because we want to, we've had a nice little run here with the chromatic scale in the inner voice, but we don't want to overdo it. Or we could do an augmentation of the subject, honestly, and create a new harmonic rhythm here. Yeah, augmentation of the subject in the pedal, in the a decently unrelated key. So we'll go 1 or 5 1 5 flat 6 here. We'll come into this cadence, then I need to take a quick break because my camera's about to run out of battery. Let's listen to this whole little section that we've just done. While I was on my break, I couldn't just leave this. I had a few ideas. So we're in D minor here after a fairly substantial cadence, and we want to have cadences throughout this. We don't want it to just go boom 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 along and then there's no shape to it, but we also can't lose momentum. So one of the ways that we can create contrast within this fairly thick polyphonic texture that we've had so far is to bring things down in the register and build them up through a sort of a stretto. So what I'm gonna do here is, we've got this perfect cadence in D minor, and then I've written in the next few bars, and there's a broader point here that we can run with from what I've done here. So we come in, we're gonna do a passing 6/4 motion. Passing 6/4 motion in the low pedals. This is gonna sound sick. This is gonna sound so Bach. And we're gonna build up. So we're gonna do this. Our subject in the in the left hand, passing 6/4 motion. It's gonna come in the lower register of the right hand. Again, not exactly the subject, but a diminished 7th chord arpeggiation. So, instead of a true passing 6/4 motion, we've got a diminished 7th chord. And then we're going to do it again. Subject happens again, slightly different in the left hand. So we're doing a stretto, building up, building tension, rising, passing 6/4 motion, in the low pedal. But then what we can do is we can bring back our chromatic scale idea. And by doing an ascending chromatic scale, we're essentially inverting, or doing a retrograde of the counter subject, right? So it's a really easily retrograded counter subject. So what we can do is we'll do this ascending chromatic scale and build up with a stretto in our other parts. So we'll go back to our modulation into D minor, and I'll play you what we have, because there's something neat that we'll be able to do here with this. this is where we left off. Right, so that on its own is cool, but what we can do now, moving on, is we can actually invert this idea. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this in the higher register, this ascending, passing 6/4 motion, and ascending chromatic scale. We're gonna put in the high, in the high part, right, in the right hand, and then bring down, one of these parts, probably what we had in the right hand. We'll have our last entry be in the pedal here. So what we're going to do is we'll have this ascending, starting with the passing 6/4 motion, and then ascending chromatic scale in the top part of our right hand. We'll fill it in with entries that happen. We'll kind of bring things down here, so you'll just have upper voice. We'll just have upper voices, but we'll have the first entry in like what would be the alto part of the right hand, and then we'll go lower, so we'll have the left hand come in with our third entry, and then we'll have our pedals come in with a really active pedal line. Let's have a listen to this section here where we have our inversion. We've spent a decent amount of time around D minor and G minor, which is, those two are fairly closely related, but we need to start getting these back into sharp keys. For wrapping this thing up, right? Because I'd say we want this to be about 4 minutes long. We're at 2.5 minutes. So we want to start thinking about, putting it in the back of our minds what we're going to do. For getting back into a more closely related key, because you're going into the recapitulation, you don't want to go from like G minor to F sharp minor for that. Oh, I know how we'll get back. This will be easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our descending chromatic scale counter subject. So we'll put an F sharp here. So this will go to a 5. Right? We can even do a passing 6/4 motion. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to an F natural here, and this chord here will place a G dominant 7, right? So we'll do almost like a tierce Picardy with the dominant 7 here, and that will fall to an E. Could be an E, an E natural, or it could be an E flat. If we did an E flat, then we could go into the dominant, right? Or no, sorry, that should be an E natural. Yeah, well, what we could do actually is instead of going to, we could get back right into the dominant here. So instead of putting, I originally said put a G dominant 7 here. If we put a G sharp diminished 7 here, well, yeah, we could use that B sharp. Or that, we can, this is going to work. This is going to be good. So, I'm going to put all of these on quarter notes so that we're not, so that's easy to work with. And we'll keep running with this left hand. So we've got this, it's not exactly the subject, but it will sound like it. Then, what we can do is we can go to a G sharp here. To do a G sharp diminished 7. And what we'll do is we'll drop it down a 5th here. So we get this interesting tritone relationship going on here. We have the subject with the tritone here and the subject with the tritone here. That'll be cool. This A should fall to a G sharp. And see, I'd like to, we could get a nice little crunch here between the bass. Normally I wouldn't want to have, you don't want to have your suspended note being heard in another part, but you can do it if it's in the bass. And this is going to be fairly crunchy, so we may as well keep up our motion. And then here we've got this diminished seventh chord here. So we can do this as a melodic sequence almost. So that B is going to want to go up. Or no, we don't. Yeah, we're in a G sharp. So that B is going to go up to an F natural. Yeah, this is going to be great. And then, so this is going to go to a C. Yeah, we can put this up to a C. And then this can stay. Now, I'm not sure that this, we'll see how this modulation here feels, because it is quite an extraneous, like they're not related keys. Let's see how this feels. I feel like I need to. We're gonna keep this going, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna suspend that third. This is gonna sound really cool when we're gonna put the subject again back down here like a stretto. So you're gonna hear the subject in the dominant from a place you were not expecting to hear it. Oh yeah, this is gonna be dope. And then this can fall down to a G sharp. And then what we'll do is we'll go to an F sharp minor right here, and then we'll have, so this can be like a prepared seventh. And then we could probably do a we could do another sequence, a fourth sequence with this. You know, because I find anytime you've got a prepared seventh like this, a fourth sequence is usually pretty good. And we'll treat this as a way to modulate back into the tonic key. And then so our next chord is going to be a B minor chord, and we'll have our seventh stay here. And then what we can do is we'll put it in the subject in our left hand. And then what we'll do is we can do something cheeky, and then we need to do it once more. Yeah, we'll probably want to continue on with a different, like end the phrase with a different idea. Like you never want to do a sequence more than 3 times. And this idea actually could be one that could be an interesting one to bring back. It's a different take on the subject that I actually think might work quite nicely if we go on. What we might do is we'll do this sequence, have a little transition, and then we'll invert this. So I could see this being cool in the bass. This that we've introduced here in an inner voice, and if we bring it in the bass, that'll be cool. Yeah, so we're gonna want to come in with something else here. And yeah, we're gonna want to have cadence. And what that can be, so we'll get an E sharp, raised leading note, because you know we are kind of tonicizing the major key here. And that B can stay there because we'll do an E diminished seventh chord, and then this can stay. Oh no, I don't need a natural sign there. And then we'll have our tune run in the... And honestly, what we can do here... Yeah, that'll be good, because we can keep our subject happening in an inner voice, and it won't get too... I don't think it'll get too muddy. Actually, yeah, no, that'll be fine. And then what we can do, we can put an E natural here. Oh, yeah. Do an F sharp diminished 7th chord. And we'll leap up here for this. Yeah, that C natural is really gonna... You're gonna be expecting to hear C sharp. And then what... Oh. Yeah, we'll do that. No, I think we need to drop the 6th. Or, honestly, we can drop the 5th. That'll be better. And then this can... Because I don't want to have 2 E naturals here, because it'll end up creating a consecutive, or, we'll have to resolve it in a weird way to get around that. We want... Yeah. And then honestly, we can treat this modulation. We'll modulate back into G, back into G minor, and we'll do the sequence again, but we'll invert it. So we'll put the what we had in the inner voice here. We'll put that in the bass this time, which will be cool, and we'll let the right hand do a bit more of the heavy working. What we've ended up doing down here, we've got an augmentation of the subject in the pedals. Then we've got a subject stretto in the left hand on one manual, and then on another manual we've got the right hand doing a subject stretto as well, with the counter subject happening in the in the inner voice, played by the thumb. So we've managed to pull off bringing everything together, which is fairly satisfying. For me, as from a compositional perspective, this is a very satisfying thing to pull off. You can be the judge of whether we really pulled it off when we listen to it in a second. And then what we did down here, right? We finish our subject augmentation. It sets us up on a C sharp minor, or C sharp major chord. 1 6 4 5 1. Doing a perfect cadence to get us back into F sharp minor for our recapitulation. So we're not slowing down quite yet for the recapitulation. What I've done for the recap is basically just taken, with a few small tweaks, I'll just get back to it here, our subject entry in the pedals. So the subject is coming back in the pedals, and we can reuse a lot of this material again. I've made a few small changes, just to make it work with the registration of transposing it down a fifth, essentially. So what we'll do now is we'll have a listen to this augmentation section leading into our recap. So this is where we're going to slow things down and really make it feel like the piece is over, because, you know, where we've had the subject come back throughout the piece in so many different keys, and so often it's not, you know, like someone analyzing this piece would know that it's the recapitulation here, but like the listener, it's not obvious. And honestly, I think that that's kind of fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to try another augmentation. So we're going to go with, I kind of foreshadowed this earlier on with something that I said about how, you know, you want to continue momentum throughout this type of writing, right? So I've really been intentional about not having long breaks, right? If we're coming to a cadence point, you know, you might have 2 or 3 of the parts break and then another one of them keep going on and we bring everybody else back in, right? Or we come to a cadence and then we keep going with a sequence or something or a stretto or some next idea, right? We never have a real rest or a real break. We're going to break with that here. You know, one of the ways to really kind of foreshadow an ending for a piece that's been, you know, at a fast tempo, contrapuntal, busy, there's lots going on here, is to bring things down in terms of the rhythm, right? We're not going to slow down the tempo. I mean, I'm not going to write it in at this stage, right? Or write in new metronome markings to give that idea in Sibelius. I'm sure that someone playing this would probably do a, you know, that's open to their interpretation. But we're going to slow the rhythm down here. And what I'm thinking we'll do, you know, we've got this interrupted cadence here. We're going to bring the subject back in the bass, right? So we have this interrupted cadence, fairly significant chord. You know, it's going to really capture the attention. We'll try a quarter note augmentation. That's gonna be what we're gonna want, and then we're gonna do something. This is gonna be very Bach here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have like something really sustained happening in our, like, you know, some suspensions. You know, really taking advantage of the sustaining power that the organ has. Out of all of the instruments, the organ has the best sustaining power of being able to just, you know, crank out chords and hold them for a long amount of time. We could also truncate the subject, because I feel like this might go on for too long if we use that whole subject. No, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna basically skip these 2 bars in the augmentation and just bring it into this. That'll bring us down for a perfect cadence, because these are all going to be quarter notes. Because I feel like if we do this for too long and kind of overdo it, it could ruin the effect that we're going for. I feel like we want to have a C sharp diminished 7th chord here, and then this guy can fall to the D here. We'll make this a B chord, or we could make it a G sharp 7. A 2-7, yeah, that'll be good. So we're going from an F sharp diminished 7 here, or an F sharp dominant to a C sharp diminished 7. So this will be great. So we can put our, you know, a reference to our subject in here. It's slightly changed. In the subject, we had this interval on a B, D, B. Now we're doing C sharp, E, C sharp, but it'll be recognizable. And then this can go to the D. Yeah, this will be good. Let's slow this down even more. So we're going to, so we've got a G sharp diminished chord here. I don't think we've made it, we haven't made it a diminished 7th, and we won't make it a diminished 7th, because what we'll do is we'll keep a 2 harmony here. And we can fall to this 7, or we'll write this just a little differently, and we'll do a tierce to Picardy. We'll kind of keep it, end on a bright note. And honestly, I like this even slower than we've had it. I'm going against what I said earlier about not needing to write it in. We absolutely do need to write this in, because we won't get the drama that we want here. So let's just have a listen to this ending. Make sure it's what we want before we have a listen to the whole fugue. Let's put this writ a little further over, and we'll put him on this, I think. It's just... Yeah, great ending. So what we'll do is we'll listen to the whole thing. Right? We've written this fugue together. Let's just listen to it and enjoy the music. Hopefully we won't find anything that we need to fix. It's always terrible when I'm in these videos and say, oh, great, you know, let's have a listen to it, and then we find something that we have to go work on. That was our fugue. I hope you enjoyed the piece and learned something along the way from seeing this process. This is the first time that I've written a piece in the video. Normally I just like play the piece and talk about it. So let me know in the comments if this is a format that you guys enjoy. You know, always appreciate feedback both on the music and on the way that I share it. So on that note, if you stayed to watch this entire process of me writing this fugue, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to keep up to date with the compositional work that I'm doing.